So what is going on, guys? I am Black Ops Amazing. Welcome back to another video where today we are looking at Black Ops 1 Zombies 10 years after its release. This game came out in 2010. The year is now 2020, and although it came out a few months from now, I thought why not take a look back at Black Ops Zombies, all of the maps and features that this game had, and see how it stands up 10 years later. For me, I think this is one of the best Zombies games that we had until Black Ops 3. This was probably my favourite, and I can remember picking this up on the day of release. I would have been, what, 10 years ago, so I'm now 21, I would have been 11. Don't tell anyone. But me and my friend would stay up all night playing the two Zombies maps on disc, which was Kino and 5. So let's get into it, taking a look at, well, Black Ops 1. As I just mentioned, on disc, this was one of the few games that had two Zombies maps at launch. Before this, World at War, we only had one, which was Kino Der Toten. Even after this, for BO2, we had one, which was Transit. Yes, there were separate areas, but it was still essentially one main map. And then even in BO3, that had one main map, which was Shadows of Evil. You could say two with the Giant, but really that was DLC, you had to pay for it. So Black Ops 1 for me was very cool because we had two Zombies maps off the bat. Kino Der Toten is an iconic Zombies map. Still to this day, this is a lot of people's favourite, and actually is probably the most famous map out of any of them. I say this a lot, but I really do mean it. If you mention Kino Der Toten, even people who don't play Zombies or aren't massive fans have probably played it or heard of it at least once. Without even seeing the stats, I'm willing to guess it's the most played Zombies map of all time. And you know what? 10 years later, I still think it is one of the scariest. Of course, we did have some of the Black Ops maps brought back with Zombies Chronicles, with updated graphics, new Easter eggs, a few new different objects, but this was the original Theatre of the Dead. Set in 1963, Western Berlin, Germany. This was the third Zombies map that we played as Ultimus altogether in. The first was Shino Numa, the second was Der Reese, and this was the third. So I guess you could say we were used to them by now. But we start off as our crew teleport into the lobby or the starting room. As with all of the Black Ops Zombies maps, our two starting weapons were the M14 or the Olympia, both for 500 points. By the way, let me know in the comment section below. Were you the M14 gang or the Olympia gang? But the starting room split off into two separate areas. You could make your way outdoors, or you could go to the right, which would take you through the main building and eventually into the theatre. This was also where we saw one of the more interesting ways of pack-a-punching, where you would have to link the teleporter to the mainframe. You would then arrive in the pack-a-punch room, and then would be teleported to some random areas. There was the dentist office, the conference room or Samantha's bedroom, both the evil and good version. The wonder weapon for this map, which again is probably the most iconic out of any, and that was the Thunder Gun. I have many fond memories of using that weapon, and Kino was filled with Easter eggs from the 115 song to the blank portrait. Who is that? There was someone locked inside of the box, knocking, trying to get out. There was an eerie atmosphere where you could hear children, women, and babies screaming and crying. Obviously, we know this was the location where Group 935 were creating their undead army, but this for me was definitely the most iconic Zombies map we have ever had. And not to mention, this is the map where a lot of people got their first high rounds on, going up to round 100, 115 is a very famous one, and even more than that. It wasn't an easy map, but if you could master it and if you knew the training routes, and well, if you were good at the game, this was just the original for everything. Now, the other Zombies map on disc was 5. I played this map quite a bit less than Kino Der Toten, as I'm sure a lot of other people did. It always felt like the side map, kind of like the one you would go to if you were bored of the other, but that's not to say it was bad, but it was difficult, especially as an 11-year-old. 5 was set on the date November 6, 1963 in the Pentagon, where we played as the President JFK, along with Robert McNamara, Richard Nixon and Fidel Castro, who became trapped in the Pentagon after a zombie outbreak, and were left to fight for their lives. Without a doubt, my favourite thing in this map was going up and down in the elevator. I would always argue with my friends who's going to spend that 250 points to buy it, but I would just sit and eat, and every time the zombies came, or I got scared, we brought it, went up, and then would just do the exact same thing over and over again. It was very rare that we went into the basement, just because this map was so tight and cramped. It was very small that it had to be played in a different way to other ones. There wasn't really any training spots. The starting room was also known as the boardroom, but the other areas on this map are the hallway, the war room, and then the lab area, which contained the testing room, the weapons room, the small room, and the pack-a-punch area, which was known as the panic room, was a new and interesting way to upgrade your guns. Instead of doing a simple task as just linking two teleporters together or finding it, I would say up till this point, this was the most difficult one, although still not too hard, you just had to activate some switches. And then the wonder weapon on 5 was the Winter's Howl. I believe this is an underrated wonder weapon. Maybe when I used it back in the day, it wasn't brilliant, but going back to play it now, or maybe this is just because I played Classified a lot, it's a good wonder weapon. But anyway, in terms of enemies, we had the crawlers, which returned from Kino Der Toten, and then a new type of enemy slash boss, as some people call him. We had the Pentagon thief who stole your weapon, and then you'd have to chase him down and kill him in order to get it back, or if you didn't, well, he's made off with your gun. This was another plus for Black Ops, since we hadn't really seen anything like this before. Between these two maps, Kino and 5, this was where zombies really started to get more, I wouldn't say complicated, but unique and complex. It wasn't just a simple game mode anymore. This was also the first map where we had our first proper intro cutscene. Before this, we only had trailers and teasers. And then we move on to our first DLC map, Ascension. My personal favourite map in Black Ops, and it was for a very long time, up until maybe Black Ops 2 when we got Origins and Mob of the Dead, but I still think it's one of the best and most fun maps to play. It is set during the same time as 5, the events happening here at the Cosmodrome and in the Pentagon are taking place at the same time, November the 6th, 1963. This map was set in an abandoned Soviet Cosmodrome, which previously belonged to the Ascension group, and what was so special about this is it was the first map with a proper Easter egg. It may seem hard to believe now, but it was only in DLC 1 for Black Ops when the first actual main Easter egg for zombies was introduced. Before that, in Kino, 5 and all of the World at War maps, there was little side things, but this was actually a main quest with an achievement. As I just said, in terms of actual gameplay, I think this is probably the most fun you're going to have in a zombies map. If you're not very good at zombies, this was also the map to play because, let's admit, it was easy, which may have been one of the reasons why I liked it so much. It did have the same wonder weapon returning from Kino Der Toten, the Thunder Gun. However, to make up for that, and by the way, it wasn't a bad thing, the Thunder Gun's really good, but Ascension introduced to us PhD Flopper. A lot of people's favourite perk of all time. Just like the map itself, it's fun. If you don't know how this perk works, because it's not something we have in zombies anymore, it was actually only purchasable in this one map. But basically, if you dolphin dive from a high distance, a massive nuke would go off around you, an explosion, and also you wouldn't take damage from explosive weapons. I think PhD suited Ascension perfectly, but that wasn't the only new perk. Stamina Up was also first introduced on Ascension, along with some interesting weapons and items such as the Gersh device and the Matryoshka dolls. Activating the Pack-a-Punch was pretty easy once you knew how to do it. It was just simply turning on the power and using all 3 of the lunar landers. And talking about turning on the power, before you did that, another unique thing to this map, there's just so many reasons as to why it was amazing, is you started off in black and white. Even on the Zombies Chronicles version, this wasn't redone. When you start off in that map, the contrast is just toned down. It isn't black and white as it was originally. I think it was a pretty neat way to start off. The layout was really easy to navigate. The special boss round on this map was the monkeys. Not gonna lie, they were pretty annoying, but easy to kill. And let's not forget about the poster. For such a long time, the question was, who was the mysterious bald man? We now know that it's Gersh, but everything on this map came together perfectly. My favourite in Black Ops, and actually out of all of zombies, depending on how I'm feeling on the day, gets into my top 5. DLC 2 was Call of the Dead. For me, at the time of playing this, it was the total opposite of DLC 1, whereas Ascension was big and spacious, Call of the Dead was big yet cramped, it was tight. There wasn't really any areas to train as there was on Ascension. Also, the visibility and the layout, it was just a lot more difficult. And for that reason, I didn't enjoy it as much. I would say one of the standout things was definitely the cutscene. Compared to the 5 one, this was more story orientated. Also, like 5, instead of playing as the OG Ultimus crew, we had a celebrity cast, which was Sarah Michelle Gellar, Robert Englund, Danny Trejo, and Michael Rooker. And what's interesting is it was the first time a celebrity cast had been done in zombies. I mean, if you don't count Nolan North as Richtofer's voice actor, but these were actors playing the role as our zombies crew. This map was actually set in present day, I believe, may even near enough the time when it came out, on March the 17th, 2011, located in an abandoned Group 935 facility in Siberia. Without a doubt, the most unique feature of this map was George A. Romero. He would slowly follow you around the map with his director's light, and if you get too close to him or accidentally shoot him, he's going to go in a fit of rage, chase after you until you calm him down by leading him into water. Cool, but very annoying having to watch your back all the time as he's always following, and also pretty much impossible to kill. It's doable, but not worth your time. The wonder weapons for Call of the Dead were the VR11 and, because there were two of them, the Scavenger. I wouldn't say very good though. The VR11 was mainly, I believe, for the Easter egg, wasn't really worth using, and the Scavenger was a sniper type of weapon, so only really good for long range. In terms of Easter egg, since this is my least played map, the last time I did this was when it came out, so I couldn't begin to tell you difficulty. And pack-a-punching, when I played this at 11 or 10 years old, bearing in mind, back then, YouTube wasn't a massive thing, or at least for me, I didn't go online and look at tutorials, so it was difficult to work out how to pack-a-punch. Although now it may seem simple, and maybe it's just because I didn't play it too much, but I can't remember off the top of my head me pack-a-punching a lot. I mean, it was just turning on the power, so obviously I was an idiot. Looking back at it now, I much prefer the Kino Der Toten remake to the original. The map for me was just a little bit too big, along with the visibility, George, it being pretty scary at the time. The atmosphere with the snow and stuff like that, I just didn't really like it, and still to this day, it's just not for me. We've all got that map that's not really for us, and for me, it's this one. There was a new perk on this, which was Deadshot Daiquiri. I think we can say not one of the more useful perks. This was one of the first maps where the story really started to develop. We had a load of radios talking about Group 935's background and Richtofen doing experimenting on his test subjects, which were Takeo, Dempsey and Nikolai. There was a few unique features such as the zip lines, the flingers which would launch you off the ship, and the ice slide. Call of the Dead was just never really for me. And then we move on to DLC 3, ShangriLa. Now surprisingly, I know a lot of people hate this map, but I preferred it to DLC 2. The atmosphere was a lot brighter, it just seemed more happy. I think we all know how small and cramped this map is. This is probably one of the worst for training zombies. For the longest time there was a discussion, where does this map take place? Is it on another planet? Mars? Some people are still talking about that, although it has been confirmed that it takes place in the Himalayas on the date April 25th, 1956, where we are back after coming from Call of the Dead with a celebrity cast to the Ultimus crew. We start off in the front of a temple, where straight ahead up these stairs you can see the pack-a-punch straight away. In the starting room, like most maps, there are two different areas you can go to, one leading towards the waterfall and the other leading towards the tunnels and the minecart. Both areas leading to the power room, where you would have to activate two power switches, which would then activate the water generators to get the power on. New features on this map included the water slide and the minecart, which were fun. There was also the mud pit maze. The wonder weapon on this map was the 31-79 JGB 215. For some reason I can never remember myself getting this all too often, but when I did, it is one of the most fun I have had. It's an amazing wonder weapon to use, not overly powered. There are definitely more useful ones, but it turns the zombies into little babies. That's why we call it the baby gun. And then talking about zombies, there were two new ones introduced, the Napalm zombie and the Shrieker. I would say the Napalm was more difficult just because of, well, you couldn't get too close to him. He was slower and stronger, and even though the Shrieker was quick, you knew when he was coming and he was easy to kill. There was also the zombie monkeys, similar to Ascension. However, these ones wouldn't take away your perks. What they would do is steal your power-ups, and then as they're running away with them, they would change. You could use this to your advantage if you killed the monkeys at the right time. There was a chance of getting a better power-up than you had before. As for the main Easter egg on this map, it essentially involved us getting the focusing stone as part of Richtofen's grand scheme. As part of this, we met two new characters called Brock and Gary, who we find out were trapped in a time loop. A very interesting Easter egg to say the least. So it had a lot of interesting features, including the way you pack-a-punch. I would say the only downside to this map really was just how cramped and tight it was. There wasn't really any room for training the zombies. You had to plan where you were going to go, kind of make your own little layout. If you're good at zombies, you won't mind this map. If you're not, maybe you would have thought it was too difficult. The first few maps that we had for Black Ops 1, definitely Kino and Ascension, were amazing. And then as we got into DLC 2 and 3, it was kind of a mixture, either you enjoy them or you don't. And then as we move on to DLC 4, this was the game changer. This was definitely Treyarch's most ambitious zombies map up until this point, and that was Moon. I still think this is one of the biggest zombies maps that we've had, not in terms of scale, although yes, that would be true, but compared to what we had before, this at the time was massive. Low gravity on Moon, a space station, it was interesting to say the least. We start off down in Area 51 in Nevada. This was different because instead of a usual starting room, this was kind of like a place where rounds didn't count. There were no weapons, there was no M14 or Olympia here, however there was the Pack-a-Punch and a perk, but most of the time you would have to leave and then come back, unless you could train the zombies and gain points to buy a perk off the bat. Most players would just jump in the teleporter and go straight to the moon base. Here, pretty much straight away, a round or two, you would come face to face with the astronaut. He worked very similar to George from Call of the Dead. He was slow and would follow you around. However, he was easier to kill and he wouldn't chase after you, go faster if you shot him. But if you did get too close, he would grab you, headbutt you, teleport you away and do some damage. I would say he was okay. He was definitely manageable. Of course, since you're on the moon, the zombies were also in low gravity as well. This was a different challenge to any other zombies map. Occasionally the zombies would go flying in the air, or you would accidentally bump into them, so you'd have to be a lot more careful than usual. In terms of wonder weapons, we had the wave gun or the zap guns. Very fun and useful. I think they suited the map perfectly. We also had the QED and the Ghost device, along with the hacker. The QED and the hacker especially were different. They were unique to this map. In terms of difficulty, I feel like this map was a challenge for pretty much all players. It wasn't too easy, it wasn't too hard. What made it difficult was the low gravity, but there were certain areas that were tight, and then there was other areas, such as the biodome, where you could just go in and train forever. The alternate or boss zombies on this map, as you could call them, I guess. They're not really bosses, but we had the Nova 6 crawlers, however this time they could teleport. We also had a new perk. Mule Kick was the first time it was introduced to the game. The Hellhounds also returned, however they would only spawn in Area 51. There was the gravity lifts, the excavators, which were a challenge. The Easter egg I think was the best one up until this point, and actually might even be the best one we've ever had to this day. Get into the end where you actually see Samantha open up the MPD. That was amazing. Also blowing up the earth, and then Samantha and Richtofen actually switching bodies, and the zombies' eyes turning from yellow to blue. I don't know, this map was a difficult one. It isn't my favourite, it's not in my top 5, maybe not in my top 10, but there's just something about it. Was that because it's on the moon? We know this map was kind of like a last minute decision. Originally DLC 4 was going to be Paris in the catacombs, but I have to say I'm glad Moon exists. It's a great map. In terms of graphics, since Black Ops 1 came out in 2010, I didn't think it was the best looking game of that generation. I don't think it had amazing graphics then. There were definitely more superior games in terms of that, but it doesn't look bad now 10 years later. Things of course are more blurry, but still to this day it holds its own, and it's definitely worth going back to play. It had some great maps, a map or two that not everybody enjoys, but overall Black Ops 1 Zombies I think was revolutionary. It made some massive changes. It introduced the first ever main quest to zombies, and without it, it wouldn't be what it is today. And so there we go. Let me know in the comment section below which map was your favourite on this game. As always, hopefully you have enjoyed. If you have, drop a like rating. Make sure you are subscribed to stay up to date with the latest videos on the channel, and I will see you in the next one. Until then, goodbye.